Hi folks, this is going to be a video tutorial about using Jamulus with Reaper, routing audio around using ReaRoute, doing video with Zoom, and then combining audio and video into a single live stream using OBS and sending it out to Facebook. That's the kind of whole thing, but actually parts of this are applicable to if you want to run virtual instruments instead of plugging instruments directly into your interface, for example, or if you want to use some processing. So I'll go through the different pieces one part at a time and kind of mention where these things might be useful. So feel free to kind of listen into those parts, and then, for example, if you're not interested in live streaming, then drop off at that point. And to start off with, I've got a Jamulus server running locally just for testing, and I've got a Jamulus client. Now, most people will probably have a similar setup to this at the moment. If we look in the settings, I've got it pointed at my Focusrite audio interface. I've got 2 inputs, 2 outputs. I'm running the more recent version of Jamulus with the small buffers set to 64. I like low latency since I'm a drummer. And at the moment, audio is set to mono, normal quality. So if I go back out of those settings and I connect to my local server here, I can see now I'm connected. I can see my microphone level coming in here on the left, and I can see the audio coming back here as well. So this would be the kind of default starting point for most people using Jamulus and an audio interface. So what I'll show you first is how to link up with Reaper. So I'm going to disconnect, and then I'm going to do some initial setup on the Reaper side. So I've got Reaper here in the background. Now Reaper is a great digital audio workstation. You can download it, just Google Reaper. It is a paid piece of software, but I believe they give you a 60-day trial, and it's not terribly expensive either. It's a brilliant piece of software. We have worked using it for live recording. We've recorded, mixed and mastered whole albums on it. Great piece of software. So I'm starting here with a completely empty project, no tracks, no anything. So first of all, I'm going to add a new track, and I'm going to call this Instruments. This is where I'm going to route my sound for the various different things that I want to actually send to Jamulus. So the first thing you can use Reaper for is basically acting as a mixer for various different sources. You may have a microphone, you may have a drum kit, you may have even another player or two if you've got a large audio interface and you want to route that sound into Reaper. So what I've got is a microphone, and I'm a drummer, so I usually use a virtual drum kit, and I trigger that using MIDI. So I'm going to add a couple more tracks on Reaper, and I'm going to group those under instruments. So I'm going to have one for microphone, and I'm going to have one for drums. I'm going to create one more track, and I'm just going to take it out of that group, and I'm just going to call that my return. So this is your basic structure. What we effectively need to do is get some audio together, which we're going to send to Jamulus, and then listen to the mix that comes back from Jamulus. So as you saw earlier, normally in your settings you point your audio interface as the device in Jamulus, and you have your inputs and your outputs. What we're going to do is we're going to put Reaper in between. So going back to Reaper, if I look at my options, my audio options, I've actually got Reaper configured to use my Focusrite audio interface. I've got all my inputs pulled in, all my outputs pulled in, and within the ASIO configuration I've got my buffer size of 64 and such set. So Reaper is fully configured to chat to my audio interface. I've also got the MIDI devices enabled, so I can do my V-drums MIDI into Reaper, and I'll be able to use that to trigger a virtual instrument. So that's all happy. That's the standard configuration you'd have for using Reaper with an audio interface. So if I go OK, you can see up here in the top corner we've got the audio interface is open, and we've got a nice short audio buffer, only adding a few milliseconds of latency. So that is Reaper all configured to talk to the audio interface in general terms. So now what I need to do is link up some channels. So first of all, for the instruments, we want to get some signals into these. So I'm going to use microphone input 1. That is actually the first input of my audio interface, so I'm going to leave that as is. And then for the drums, I'm going to use the MIDI input. I'm going to take channel 10 from the Focusrite interface. Now, this is how you might go about using virtual instruments. If you're not interested in using a virtual instrument, you can ignore this little part for this particular channel, but I'm just going to configure myself up with a drum kit to work with. So you like Stephen Slate, so I'm going to bring up Stephen Slate as a plugin, and I'm just going to load up a whole kit. Load up some samples. Give that takes a moment to load. There we go. So I've got a drum kit loaded there. The next thing to do is to turn on record monitoring for each of the channels that you're going to receive signal on. You can now see that my microphone signal is bouncing up and down on the microphone channel because it's already pointing at input 1, and you can't see anything on the drums because I'm not hitting anything at the moment. The next thing to do is turn on record monitoring. So that now means the signal is going to actually be available even when I've not got the record button pressed. So that brings the signal in. You can see it's now coming in to the instruments channel. And then if I also tap on the drums, you can see we've got some bouncing bars on the drums as well. That was the snare drum. So the next thing to do is to route this audio in and out of Jamulus. So I'm going to click the route button on instruments, and I'm going to turn off the master send because I don't want any direct monitoring of my instrument sounds. If I had that turned on and I was direct monitoring, I'd hear myself twice. Once directly and once from what Jamulus sends back in the mix. So first of all, I turn that off. Next, I add a hardware output to the instruments group here for ReaRoute 1/ReaRoute 2. That's everything I need to do on the instruments side, so I can close that one. Now I need to prepare to receive the signal back from Jamulus. So I'll go to the return channel and I click on route. We'll leave the master send on because we want that to go to our audio interface's output. And rather than doing any routing here, close that one. This input we now choose to be a stereo input from ReaRoute 1 and 2. Note that ReaRoute 1 and 2 here and ReaRoute 1 and 2 on the instruments channel, one was send, one was receive. They use the same numbering. So I choose ReaRoute 1 and 2. Okay, so now I've got everything connected up, ready to link in Jamulus. So I'm going to open up Jamulus and I'm going to go to the settings. So instead of using the audio interface, I'm going to look down this list and I'm going to use the ReaRoute ASIO driver. Now, if in the previous step you were unable to find ReaRoute within Reaper, or you don't see ReaRoute ASIO listed here, it's likely that when you installed Reaper you didn't tick the box that said install ReaRoute. Assuming you have, you'll have a virtual ASIO device here which you can select. That allows you to interface Jamulus to Reaper. So we'll go ahead and select that. And here we are with the configs. So it selects client 1 and 2 and Reaper 1 and 2 by default. You note that already matches what I selected earlier in Reaper. So we can leave that client 1 and 2, Reaper 1 and 2. Now, since we're using the DAW to do all of our mixing, that means now we have the option of having a stereo feed, and I quite like to put it on high quality as well because I note that there's better low end for drums. So here we go, that's all the config now for Jamulus. So we've pointed it at ReaRoute as the ASIO driver. The input is coming from ReaRoute 1 and 2. The output is going to ReaRoute 1 and 2. We've selected stereo and you can set the quality accordingly. If I now close those settings and I click connect, I'm going to connect to my local server for testing. 1 2 1 2 1 2. You can now see that on my input here my microphone is coming in the input, and on my output side, if I go back to Reaper and I turn on record and then record monitoring, I've got the output signal coming into Reaper that is originating from Jamulus. Now I can prove this is going through Jamulus by muting myself in the mixer. So at the moment I'm chatting and this bar is bouncing on my return. If I mute, then my return signal has gone and I can no longer hear myself through the interface. So we'll unmute that now. So at this point we have successfully routed audio from the analog domain, my microphone, and also a virtual instrument out of Reaper into Jamulus, and we've taken the mix back from Jamulus into Reaper, and it's going out of the interface into our headphones. So we can use the microphone, we could add in other channels here. If I hit the drums, I can hear that on the return as well. So this is the perfect setup for anybody that wants to do some mixing of multiple sources and feed their signal into Jamulus as a single stereo send. Be ideal for people that want to do some processing. Just make sure that any plugins you use don't add latency. I found that the built-in reverb plugin, although it has a zero latency mode, I found you had to push the buffer size up in order to not get pops and clicks. So I didn't want to suffer the kind of increased latency, and therefore I decided not to use reverb plugins. But standard kind of plugins, EQ, compression, all that kind of thing, you can certainly do without adding any latency. And of course, if you've got a virtual instrument, you can run virtual drums, synthesizers, pianos, anything like that you've got in terms of plugins. Or for example, if you've got something like Guitar Rig, you can have your channel configured, you can take your guitar input, send it through your virtual pedal board and out to Jamulus. So that gets all the kind of the basics working for mixing and making sound. Now the next thing that I want to look at is how you can then combine this with a video stream, put the audio and video together and be able to cast it to something like Facebook Live. Now if you're not interested in doing that and you're only interested in mixing, doing virtual instruments, that kind of thing, jump off now. You've seen all the good stuff. But if you're interested in how to take recordings of your sessions with a video as well, or to actually cast something like Facebook Live or YouTube, then watch on. So the first thing I'm going to do for now is just disconnect on Jamulus. Don't need that active at this precise moment in time. I'm going to do a bit more work on sending the signal to different places and also setting up the video side of things. So first things first, I'm just going to get Zoom up. Now there's a couple of options in Zoom that you may be interested in, but mostly you can use it in its default mode. The only thing I found useful is in the video side of things. Sometimes you may wish to tick mirror or untick mirror to make it look the way around, and you may want to untick the box that says always display participant names on their video. Then you won't have little names in the corner with mute symbols. That's an important fact actually. So when you're on Zoom, you need to make sure all the participants are muted because you're using Jamulus for audio. You don't want multiple audio paths. You'll just end up with odd sounding things coming out of internal laptop speakers and other things like that in default configurations. So if you jump on Zoom and go new meeting, now it'll bring up a standard one. At the moment I haven't got the video started. Inside the participants there is a useful mute all button. You'd also want to mute yourself, so just be aware of that. So make sure anyone who joins is muted. I'm going to just start video a moment so you can see. Interestingly, it won't start video. I suspect that's because I'm using it elsewhere. So I shall work that out in a moment. Okay, I've just jumped back on. I had a quick look for a moment and there was just a little problem with the webcam. So now if I click start video, you can see here I am with some headphones on, sitting in my lovely garage, which is a very attractive place to be doing jamming. But there we go. So if I now leave that open, obviously you can invite people to join this. I'll make sure myself's muted. There's also a few options. For example, when you go mute all, you can mute all the participants. You can also untick this box, for example, that allow participants to unmute themselves, which can help avoid having people in the Zoom call with open mics, because obviously all the audio should be coming through Jamulus. So you can poke those different options around. But for now, pop that away, and obviously you can grab your meeting details and you can share it with your participants. So I'm just going to leave that window open, but I'm going to go back to the other applications for a moment. So we've got the video part ready. You put it in gallery view, you get all your different participants joining, and then you'll all be able to see each other. The next thing that I need to do is, in order to send the audio along with the video, I need to provide it out of Reaper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another hardware output to the return. Now I use ReaRoute 5 and 6 for this particular one, because I use 3 and 4 for something else on one of my other projects. So I'll just pop that in there. You could use 3 and 4. Just make sure it's not the same one you're already using for Jamulus. So add the hardware output on the return for 5 and 6. That means we're also then sending out this data, this mixed audio that we're receiving back from Jamulus. So in order to get this so we can all see, I'm going to connect again on Jamulus, connect to my local server. Here we go. And I'm just going to wind up my buffers a little bit so that I get nice clean audio in my ears for a moment, because I'm on a local network and I've got a very short delay. There we go. Okay, so now Jamulus is active, it's chatting to Reaper again. I haven't changed any other config. The audio is coming in the return, and now I'm also sending out that return via ReaRoute again on 5 and 6. So that means Reaper's ready to send audio data. We've got Zoom running here with a video, everybody muted, and anyone else can join to get a nice gallery view. So the next place we need to go is to OBS. This is Open Broadcaster software. Just type OBS into Google. It's a free piece of software. It's brilliant. Now at the moment I'm using it to record this tutorial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hijack what I'm doing, and you'll see it as I kind of continue to make changes. So first of all, you can see at the moment my audio is coming into OBS via this mic aux. What we actually need to do is take in the audio from Reaper. So in order to do that, in a very similar way that we routed audio in and out of Jamulus using ReaRoute, we're going to do the same thing for OBS. Now, in order to do this, you need to download a plugin called OBS ASIO. Google it, it's the first result. It has a GitHub repository, and there is package downloads. You just grab the download, run the installer, and that's it. It's very easy. So once you have installed the OBS ASIO plugin, if you go to your sources and click plus, you will have an option called ASIO. If it's not here, you haven't installed the plugin properly. So if I now click ASIO, I'm going to call this Reaper. And then I'm going to choose, just like I did in Jamulus, ReaRoute ASIO, format stereo, and I'm going to choose 5 and 6. You'll notice now, if I close this window, but you can already see it below, I'm going to save the changes, I've now got a feed coming in from Reaper as well, and it looks remarkably similar to my microphone, which I've been recording with directly. So that means now I can mute this one, and you're hearing the audio that's coming via Reaper. It's also going through Jamulus first. So my voice in this tutorial is now coming, I'll show you the signal path. Let's go back to Reaper. It's coming in this channel here on the microphone from my audio interface on input 1. It's going to the parent channel group called Instruments. The Instruments group is not going to the master. It's being sent out of a hardware output, which is the ReaRoute 1 and 2 device. The ReaRoute 1 and 2 device is coming as the input of Jamulus, which is here. Jamulus is receiving our input, sending it to the server, coming back to us with a mix. We have set our personal mix here, and then Jamulus is sending its audio mix back out on ReaRoute. That is coming in here on input ReaRoute 1 and 2, which is then routed to our master, as well as ReaRoute 5 and 6 to send it off to OBS, and our master is connected to our audio interface. If I look at the routing for master, output 1, output 2, that is my headphones on my Focusrite audio interface. And if we go back to OBS, then here is our send from Reaper, which was ReaRoute 5 and 6. So the last part we need for what we want to actually see is the Zoom call. So at the moment I'm capturing the whole of my desktop for this tutorial, but what I'll do is I'll also add in the Zoom call. So I'm going to go add source window capture, and I'm going to call this Zoom. Now I can find the window that I want here, so let's try the first Zoom one. There you go. And I'm not going to capture the cursor because I just want to capture the video. Now, because I've also turned off the titles for participants, if I'm not doing anything on the Zoom window, all the little cursors, toolbars, everything else just disappear. So if I go OK on that, you can now see here I am. I have got my video from Zoom. Now, if I right click on it, I can then go transform and I can say fit to screen. So now, rather than seeing my desktop on this tutorial, you're seeing a picture of myself, and the audio, of course, is coming in already. Now, that means that we've got video and audio in OBS ready to be recorded or streamed. Now, to make it a bit easier, I am going to make my Zoom video smaller. See some nice recursive effects going on here, and so now you can also see my desktop again. So at the moment, I am recording in OBS. That's for the purposes of the tutorial. There's also a button here called Start Streaming. That's what you use to send it to Facebook Live. And all you need to do is configure a few settings in OBS in order to do this. So, when you set up OBS, there's a nice kind of intro tutorial which will talk you through most of the basics. I set it up to point to Facebook Live, and I configured it so that it had a bit rate of 4 megabits, because that would be suitable for what I needed to do. I also usually set the base canvas size to the slightly smaller, so let me show a few of those settings. So here we are in the settings. If I look at the stream, I've got service set to Facebook Live, and there's this magic field here called a stream key. I'll show you what that means in a minute. And then if you look at output, I've got the video bit rate for streaming set at 4 megabits. Inside audio, that's where I had it configured for the local microphone. And inside video, this is where you set the base canvas resolution. Now normally, as I say, I don't do it on full HD, but I've put it on full HD so that you get a really good view of my desktop for the purposes of this tutorial. So that's all connected up now, and if I were to pop in the appropriate stream key here, when I click start streaming, it would send that data to Facebook. So to recap, we've got the video here, we've got the audio here, so the only part we need now is the receiving point on Facebook so we can actually do a stream. That's really easy. So if you're logged into Facebook, just go to your profile page is a good place, or a group. There's a button that says live video. In fact, you can see one that I recorded earlier there from a previous jam. If you click this live video button, Facebook will have a little think, and then it will normally ask you about trying to use your own camera and media and that kind of thing. You don't want that. You need to click the button here that says use stream key. Once you click that, you have a magic stream key here. You can copy that, and then you can go and paste it into the settings, which is just there. So now if I copy that and I go here, save that stream key, and then if you scroll up the page, you see Facebook says it's waiting for live video. Now I've never tried this while I'm recording, but it should do the same. So if I now click start streaming, it should now send it to Facebook as well as this recording. There we go. We've got my live stream coming through to Facebook. So it's got audio, it's got video. It looks a little bit of a mess, obviously, because I've got a desktop and recursive effect going on, but it has connected it. And then when you actually want to then make it appear on your timeline or in your group, you just click the go live button once you've checked everything's working. So if I go back to OBS now, when I'm finished, I can click stop streaming just for testing purposes. Normally though, what you'll do is once you've gone live, you will then click a button to stop it when you're done, and Facebook will ask you if you want to save it, and then it will just sit there as a nice post and that kind of thing. But for now, I'm just going to go stop streaming because I don't actually want to go live. So if I stop streaming, in a moment, the video feed disappears from Facebook. So there we go. We have linked all the audio together. We've captured the video from Zoom, and we have fed it all back out via a streaming service to Facebook Live. If you don't want to stream it, you just want to take a video for later, you can use the record button that I'm using here. Currently it says stop recording because I'm recording, but when you're not recording, it'll just say start recording. In the same way the button above says start streaming. And you can take a recording of your session. Then you can always do some editing afterwards. So that's basically how you connect all the different pieces together. How you get the audio in and out of Reaper. How you get the video captured from Zoom, and how you put the two things together using OBS and stream. If you've got any questions, drop us a message in the comment. If you'd like me to go over anything in more detail, again, drop us a comment. I'd be happy to explain anything further that's not obvious. So hope this has been useful. Keep up the jamming. Thanks.